What's up everyone, Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick, and I have yet another album review for you. So another one that came out that I did have my eyes on, and we just wanted to cover some of the bigger ones first, but I definitely wanted to go over this one, was the newest offering from Mass Worship, Portal Tunes. This also comes out on the 4th of February on Century Media Records. This band is relatively new. They formed in Sweden in 2018. This is only their second release. And as for the sound, well, it's kind of like a hodgepodge of a lot of different things. There's definitely hardcore, crust, maybe a little bit of like death doom, and definitely a bit of Swedish death metal. The guitar tone on here is definitely some HM2 friendly, sort of gnarly, dismember, entombed sort of filth. And I would definitely say a little bit of Meshuggah, but not necessarily all the fierce polyrhythms, but in terms of some of the riff construction and melodies. And as for those melodies, get ready, I'm gonna be saying dissonance a lot on here because this band fucking loves dissonance. I have to say I really like how this opens with Spectral Void. There is this cool fade in with the drums, and it kind of has this effect like those war drums are getting closer, we need to run, or some shit. It kind of has this cool horror movie vibe, like if you don't run, the drums are getting closer and more intense, definitely something's gonna happen, maybe cannibals with a drummer with them because everyone needs theme music, I guess. But yeah, it kind of builds and then just fucking explodes into this very gnarly production. I don't know who produced this because finding information on this band was a little bit difficult, and I was kind of surprised they weren't covered on Metal Archives, but the production just screams Kurt Ballou, especially the drums. The drums sound so fucking huge on here. That snare sounds like it is being punished, but the feel of it is just massive. And then you couple that with these dirty, thick, HM2, crunchy, filthy guitars and these roared vocals. It's just a wall of sound that just comes rolling over you. And honestly, it's these first two tracks that are kind of like nasty pace setters for the album, because these sort of exhibit most of what you're gonna hear on here. These guys love the groove, sort of like a breakdown groove the entire time, but the atmosphere is dark. This is kind of one of those like cathartic listens. And most of the time they are just pummeling you with these heavy, dirty riffs, and then behind it you have these dissonant melodies, pretty much again, kind of like Meshuggah, which complement the overall feel while the vocalist barks out all sorts of hateful, dark things, I assume. It's kind of hard to make out what he's saying, but the tone of this album is very dark. It's just dreary and kind of angry about being so dreary, I think. But again, this is sort of like a fucking metal potluck. There's a really cool slowdown in the title track that just gets a fierce neurosis vibe. It just kind of crawls along with these dissonant melodies. The vocals are just sort of more cavernous on that, and the atmosphere just kind of shifts to well, I mean, neurosis, and you don't listen to neurosis to really feel good. And this really isn't a feel-good moment, but it's a really well-executed moment. And then Unholy Mass kind of starts off very Cult of Luna-ish, but then that song kind of moves into very melodic lead work, and you kind of hear a little bit of mellow death sort of come out of that. So far, you kind of have this sort of hodgepodge of Meshuggah-style breakdowns, albeit a little bit more 4/4 time than Meshuggah does. I mean, I'm not saying all this is 4/4 time, but it's more 4/4 time than Meshuggah does. HM2 Swedish death metal, little bit of like At the Gatesy sort of melodic death metal, and I guess you could say hardcore and metalcore, but it's more along the lines of bands like Converge, Trap Them, Fuming Mouth, I would say would be one to throw in there, though they are relatively new as well. And I guess by that you could almost say it's kind of metalcore, but it really isn't entirely that. I don't know, it gets kind of confusing in terms of like centering in on this band's sound in terms of, you know, them pulling influences from different camps, but coming together for this like homogenized pot of evil breakdown stew that they have cooked for everyone. And well, I'm going back for fucking seconds. Actually, I already did, because I did listen to this twice and I enjoyed it a lot. And again, as I said, dissonance is a big thing on here too, and that sort of like just keeps this sort of cavernous atmosphere going. But there's other sorts of like ambient noise in the background. The title track, I swear, like parts of it sound like they recorded the song while a train passed the studio, because there's this sort of underlying hum. And it's probably the guitars, the bass, or it could be the obelisk on the cover. Like, it's good to see the obelisk from 2001 still getting work, but stay away from that fucking thing. It's not trustworthy. But the cool thing I like about this is, with all this distance and all this atmosphere, there's still a lot of melody. There's still a lot of riffs and hooks on here. Orcus Mouth and Revel in Fear both have some surprising turns to melody. Revel in Fear has a really cool clean break, which honestly, that's one of the first times you really hear clean guitars in here, because the rest of the time they are just fucking filthy. And honestly, it's one of the first times you hear a guitar lead on here, which the first lead, because there's 2 leads on it, which I thought was really interesting for a more hardcore oriented band, is very squawky, very kind of shreddy. It's very ugly sounding. And then the second lead after this melodic section comes in and it's very tuneful, like really melodic phrasing, a lot of feel to it. And I kind of like that weird shift in the song. Like, it starts off heavier than hell, has this clean break, and then ends still heavy, but way more melodic, and it's complemented by 2 very different solos. And then Orcus Mouth, towards the end, brings in these chanted clean vocals over tribal drums and sort of just like an atmospheric section. And again, it's kind of a nice break on an album where I didn't think I was gonna get any breaks, because again, one track after the other just keep pummeling the shit out of you. And it's really cool how they kind of use this nice little build up to that clean section at the end of Orcus Mouth too. Like, it kind of just builds the mood. And granted, the mood on here is generally very dark and foreboding. But again, with those cool melodies, those cool leads in there that are, again, decidedly more melodic, it almost feels as though it's kind of pleasant. But, you know, we go right back to the darkness later. And actually, I would say this album gets even darker towards the end. The last 2 tracks, Empyrean Halls and Deliverance, are quite possibly, I don't know, the heaviest, at least in a way. I think Empyrean Halls is kind of where the more death metal side shows up. The riffs on it get a little bit more dark, more sinister. Like, they're not just aggressive and heavy. There's actually some tremolo riffs on there, which tremolo riffs aren't really a huge thing on here. Most of it is just breakneck fucking chugging and just sort of delivering that hyper aggression with all that creepy atmosphere in the background. These actually kind of get maybe like a little bit blackened death, because there is a little bit of a black metal vibe to it. But I like this shift from angry and dark to just evil and dark. Like, this one feels way more foreboding. And then when you get down to Deliverance, which it's kind of interesting that the previous track, Empyrean Halls, actually kind of leads into it a little bit with the frontman screaming Deliverance kind of over and over, and then it gets to the song Deliverance, and this thing's almost a Death Doom song. It's the slowest song, it's the longest song. It is driven by this massive chuggy riff that pretty much carries throughout it, and this really cool repeating melody that honestly, if you sort of took off a little bit of this extra distortion, would not feel out of place on like a Paradise Lost album or a My Dying Bride album. It has that sort of melody where it's catchy, but it's dismal, it's depressing, it's dark, and this song just sort of trudges through the murk and the mire right up to your fucking doorstep just to tell you that life sucks. It's just bleak, and I'm having a bad day, and I'm here to tell you about it in the most aggressive fashion that I could possibly tell you about it. That is this song. But again, it has these really cool melodies that you can latch onto. It's not just, you know, laying on the distance to really sort of create all the atmosphere there. Like, it's really creating a cool mood with the melodies itself. And again, I bring up the Meshuggah influence that I think is definitely on here, but it never really comes across as djenty. I think there's some syncopated riffs in the song Dunes of Bone, which I'm pretty sure is what happens when a sandworm on Arrakis pukes his guts out. Or actually, well, everyone else's guts. But that actually has like a little bit more of those syncopated chugs that you're kind of used to. And the time signature, again, is, you know, not basic, but it's definitely not Meshuggah level. But again, there's a lot of other stuff in play. There's some more hardcore stomps in there. And kind of the thing that I like with hardcore infused stuff is you get like some D beats, some faster sections. And there's really not much in the way of more up-tempo material. There's a little bit in Scorched Earth where it picks up the pace of it, but most of it kind of just hangs on to the steady groove. But it's a very headbangable groove. And there's really nothing wrong with a headbangable groove. I love it, but I feel like they kind of hang on to that a little bit too much on here. And a faster song might sort of break up the pace of this, because the only thing that really kind of breaks up the pace overall is probably the last track, And then Unholy Masses, which is probably the most different track on here. It's predominantly instrumental. It's the most melodic track overall. In fact, it is mostly carried by very awesome leads and just sort of a clean but dissonant melody behind it. Again, kind of has a little bit of a post-metal feel. I brought it up a little bit earlier, but the reason why I wanted to go into it a little bit more is this actually kind of felt like it was going to be like a really cool break in the whole album flow, just in terms of like, all right, let's kind of dial it back down, give them a valley, because we're peaking a lot here. And it does for the most part. But then it sort of tags on a breakdown at the end, which is really cool. I like the breakdown, but at the same time, I was like, I think they should have just let this be an instrumental or just a softer track. Maybe just throw in some ambient chanting that was on Orcus Mouth. I think that would have been really effective there. But instead, they sort of just tagged on this little bit at the end that, while it was good, it necessarily didn't flow with the song very well. And in terms of carrying over the next song, it's still a bit of a break in there, so it didn't go like immediately into it. I just feel like it was sort of a missed opportunity to kind of make this flow a little bit better. But overall, I mean, those are just kind of minimal complaints. This was just a nasty listen. This is just heavier than hell, and it's heavy in a lot of different ways. And I don't know, like, what it is, it's definitely a hodgepodge. I really can't call this one thing. Like, you could call it hardcore. You could probably call it metalcore. You might be able to get away with calling it death metal. There's enough elements of all of those on there, but it's kind of its own thing, and I kind of like it that way. Like, this is not quite a unique heavy, because there's a lot of bands that do blend all these styles, but it really kind of satisfies a lot of different itches just in terms of just outright brutality. So overall, I'm gonna give this 4 stars. I really, really dug this album. Across the board, it is heavier than hell. The atmosphere is very caustic, scathing, like it's just ridiculously heavy, but those little spots of melody in there really break it up well, and the fact that they didn't just lay on the dissonance the entire time just to sort of create atmosphere the entire time. Like, no, let's break it up with some really cool leads, some clean sections, some chanted vocals. It breaks up well, and it makes this a more immersive listen. I kind of would have liked to have heard them explore a little bit of that cleaner side like they had on Unholy Mass. I just think there was a little bit of a missed opportunity there. But overall, this is just a dark listen, and it only gets darker as you go on. Like I said, by the time you get down to those last 2 tracks, it feels like hope and happiness was just sucked right the fuck out of the room and replaced with distilled misery, which honestly sounds like that was what they were going for. So mission accomplished, guys. You created a dark, brooding fucking banger of an album, and well, I already went out and ordered it, and I ordered their first one too. Haven't even listened to that one, but if it's anything like this one, I'll probably love it. And honestly, if you guys love just heavy, dark, breakdown, doomy, again, this band's sound is, again, such a hodgepodge of different heavy things, but it comes together so well. It's just a massive sounding record, and you guys should definitely check it out if you love heavy music. I think heavy music is pretty much in general, like if you like breakdowns and super distorted guitars and dark, foreboding atmosphere, if you like any of that, I strongly recommend checking this out, because this was a fucking nasty listen. So if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there will be a link down below. And shirts. As soon as we hear about our shirts, which I know are being made, you will know, because we'll show them off in a video, and we will be doing a giveaway once we hit 10,000 subs, which we're not far, which is incredible. Again, something that we just started here in our basement because we liked talking about metal, because we're obsessed. Well, I think mostly I'm really obsessed, but they're also obsessed too, just not as much. But yeah, it took off, and thank you guys. You're the reason it took off. We love bullshitting with you. We love all the support you guys have given us. And we look forward to littering YouTube full of our nonsense even more, because you guys seem to like it and we still enjoy doing it. So stay tuned for more stuff from us, because, well, we're pretty unrelenting, aren't we? So with that, I thank you all once again, and we will catch you later.